I started out as a product designer, industrial designer, specifically doing product design. Instead of designing products for someone else, we just decided to design our own product and build a company around that.
A lot of founders have really struggled with this concept. They think that I want money now, I'm going to start talking to VCs. And what they don't realize is, no, you need to be building these relationships months in advance, if not a year or two in advance.
We built that product, we manufactured it, we started selling it to some success.
Welcome to episode 14 of Fundraising Demystified, the podcast where we uncover the untold stories of startup founders who have raised capital to bring their visions to life. Join me, Jason Kirby, as I interview these founders and dive into the untold hidden truths of how they got funded. Today, we have Juan Garcia Mansilla, CEO and co-founder of Unit 1, a safety hardware company providing smart safety for urban mobility. They raised a $3.5 million Series A for a total of $6.6 million raised. We discussed the importance of Kickstarter for getting the company off the ground, raising a total of $750K in pre-sales, how they had to pivot during COVID, and how raising too many rounds led to a difficult cap table, and so much more. Let's go ahead and get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today I'm excited to introduce Juan Garcia Mansilla with us today. He's going to be the founder of Unit 1, and I'm super excited to have him bring on the show. One, his product designer background, his products are beautiful, and we're going to hear about his story of, pivoting to the product he is today. Juan, thanks for joining the show.
Jason, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Now, what would be great is if you can just give the audience a little bit of a background on how you became, product designer to where you are now, where you've successfully closed a $3.5 million Series A. What's that journey been like? And just kind of give us a little bit of that story.
Sure, I can do the capsule thing. So I started out as a product designer, industrial designer, specifically doing product design back in Argentina. That's where I'm from. I was having the time of my life there, designing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I ended up partnering up with my then boss to kind of build for the first time, instead of designing products for someone else, we just decided to design our own product and build a company around that. So we set out to do that. I partnered up with him very, very soon after. We added our third co-founder, Francisco, who provided a very much needed business background, because two designers running a company I can get tricky. And then with that kind of a balance in place, we set out to design a product, build a product, fund it, at least fund its production, build the brand around it, launch it, build it, sell it, the whole works. We had a pivot in the middle. I'm happy to discuss in a minute. And then long story short, we now find ourselves in the urban mobility space, designing and building safety accessories for all of cycling, with a heavy focus on design and safety through tech. So we use tech to make our products safer and make our riders safer. Ultimately, what we want is to, put more butts on bikes and take people away from cars, help them adopt cycling as a lifestyle, and push them a little bit of a push from our part to kind of promote this lifestyle altogether, make it safer, make it easier to adopt.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show because as a cyclist and e-skater myself, and a worrisome wife who wants me to be safe all the time, I will say you have probably one of the sexiest and safest helmets I've seen on the market. And,
Thank you.
Excited to, kind of learn how this journey got started. So you kind of gave us a little, shortened down version. What I really like to understand is, what was that first product kind of before the pivot? And, what was that story like? Because you raised some money for that, and then you had to kind of transform the business to what you guys are today. So tell us a little bit about that origin story.
Yeah. So I'm a lifelong skier. I always loved the snow. And so our first product kind of came from there. Big fan of listening to music, while skiing, big fan of skiing in a group, walkie-talking one another. So I was I was a ski instructor in Vail one season, and classic, aha moment after trying all sorts of different gizmos for actually listening to music or communicating comfortably amongst other skiers. And I just identified this super concise pain point as a skier that was unsolved because I had tried everything from AirPods to audio kits to you freaking name it. So that was a very clear problem that needed to be solved, which is essentially the perfect input you can give a product design that's a product design that's looking for a problem to solve. That's what a product does anyway. So we kind of use that as fuel, and it ended up being this unique ski and snowboard helmet with headphones that you could detach for after skiing. And then you had this pretty big and sturdy interface that you could use with gloves on for volume and just track control. And there was walkie-talkie amongst friends and all the stuff that we always wanted to have and never could. We put on a product. We designed that. We put it on Indiegogo back then because we thought it was a good idea. The campaign was not successful, not even remotely. But we still believed that it was a product worth doing. So we pretty much froze those funds. I think it was like $50K. So it's not going to cover the molds even. So nowhere nearly enough. So we froze that money. We said, okay, we're never going to get anywhere with that. So we literally looked for an accelerator that could take us to the next level, take us to a place where we could actually raise around. We were lucky to be drafted by the first ever edition of the Lead Sports Accelerator in Berlin, founded by the family of the Adidas grandchildren, Adidas' grandchildren. So the Adidas family was behind this thing. It was sports oriented, hence they're taking us. And so from there, we ended up raising our first round to go and build this thing. Only then we released the funds for the campaign. We told them, hey, so this is going to take a while longer because we ended up having to fund this elsewhere. And we actually offered refunds to everyone. It's like, hey, do you still want to wait for it, or do you want your money back? Because we hadn't used it. And thankfully everyone said, okay, I'll wait. So we ended up using it, and we did the works. We went to China to build suppliers from scratch. Very scary moment, but also memorable in a ton of ways. Lots of fun stories there. Scary moments too. But then, so we built our supplier network from scratch. We built that product. We manufactured it. We started selling it to some success. We sold out one season, a small batch. And we sold another season. We sold out again, smaller batches. And we were kind of starting to ramp up, we started identifying some issues in the product that we wanted to solve to, take it to the next level, probably Gen 2 or something. And then all ski resorts in the world closed overnight. And we had one product, seasonal, that we couldn't sell for the foreseeable future. We had about $500K in the account, intended to make more of these helmets. And we said, this is too risky. It's like, we could very well die on top of a pile of helmets that we can't sell. So we told our investors, we need to, pump the brakes, and we need to figure out a way to navigate this that ends up in a different place. Because remember, picture early days of the pandemic, knowledge was scarce. Everyone was scared. No one knew what exactly was going to happen. And all we knew was that every ski resort was closed and we couldn't sell our single product. That's more than enough to kill any startup, basically.
That is quite the journey. And there's a couple of things I want to kind of point out here that I think are interesting about this journey that you've been through of, first identifying the kind of a personal pain point and, kind of building on from that point, bringing together people around you, people that you trust, and, kind of solve certain gaps in the business. And then eventually, getting a product, to market, dealing with the challenges that, maybe the Indiegogo is going to be a home run. That's all you ever need. But in reality, it necessarily wasn't. But wise enough to go out, find the right type of investor. You're not necessarily pitching VCs at this stage. You're finding an accelerator
No,
that knows they're betting early, and you found perfect alignment, in terms of, the Adidas accelerator. And so it sounds like you had an incredible like learning journey to get to this point. And then the world just kind of kicked you in the face, and, you quickly reacted to that, as opposed to being like, everything's going to be fine, which, we look back 3 years now and it's like, it wasn't, we all survived. Well, not everyone, but I guess, when we look at the, scenario of the decisions that you made and giving you the opportunity to like, hey, we still have some cash. What can we do with this? Let's not pile up in more inventory when we don't know what the future is, especially because, you got to hold out for at least a year, just kind of given the market climate. Maybe you could sell down to South America, the Southern Hemisphere.
It ended up being even more than that. It ended up being almost 2 seasons. I mean, Northern Hemisphere, I'm not talking North winter, North, South, but 2 Northern Hemisphere seasons. It would have killed us. I can tell you now.
Yeah, easily. And what are you going to do? You just sit on your hand. Like you can't, so you made a smart decision. You basically communicated to your investors, which is another point I want to point out to our listeners of like, you're not doing this in a silo. A lot of people bottle this up, get scared, don't know what to do. But it sounds like you took the right step. You communicated to your shareholders and stakeholders, and let's continue. So obviously since then you've had some success. It's been a couple of years since that point. You have a new product in the market. You've had some Kickstarters. So let's talk about, this new journey of discovering, post pivot.
Yeah, sure. So we took that $500,000 we had reserved for more inventory, and we set it out for designing and developing a new product in a new space that was going to use some of the supplier network that we had built, some of the knowledge that we had accrued. Otherwise, it was going to be a hard reset. Like we kept the brand, we kept most of our suppliers, we kept a lot of stuff, shareholders, team, you name it. We kept all that we could, and we trying to be as smart as we possibly could in terms of where to go. And we had originally envisioned to go into the urban space at some point, but we just brought it up way in advance. And we said, okay, it's not going to be an additional space. We're going to make a full switch. It's going to be snow, no more hollow urban mobility. It was a hard call. I can't claim credit for it. This originated in Francisco, my co-founder, and it was a hard sell even for me. Like I was in love with the snow. I was lifelong skier. I had built this from the heart, from that special place, and it was just ripping me out of there was painful. And I wasn't even a cyclist back then. So I had, as a designer, I didn't have anywhere close as a strong a link as I had with the snow. It was very hard for me to feel empathy or a relationship to this new world that we were getting into, because I wasn't part of it yet. So I was the first one that needed convincing, actually, before even talking to the investors. Once we were, all us three founders were on board, we told the investors, hey, we got to make this move. It's going to be urban mobility. It's going to be a helmet. Yes. There's going to be some tech in it, as we had on the snow helmet before. That's all we can tell you. Right? I cannot give you more because we don't have more. And they were somewhat receptive to the idea. Some of them asked like a bike helmet. Like, really? We didn't get into unit 1 for biking. Certainly they didn't. We weren't either, but, and they asked, well, what is it going to have? And like, no clue. Just trust us that we will make something that is cool, that solves an actual problem. Same as before, same process, only in a different space. So they trusted us, and we charged on. And in the middle of the pandemic, we designed and developed FARO, which was a challenge in itself because it was Zoom calls. It was the new reality very early on, which for product development can get tricky. So we learned how to do that. We designed FARO, we launched it on Kickstarter, and we sold more FARO in 2 weeks that we sold the snow helmet in 2 seasons. And at that point, everyone was on board, like, you go ahead now. You're good to go. And like, okay, this is clearly the reception that we intended. And it just blew apart. It was just so well received, and we never looked back.
And well, and like, I guess, what was that timeline from like the world's burning, COVID's taken over the world, and now you have proven this new product, this pivot has worked.
March to October.
That's not bad. Okay. Not bad to conceptualize a whole new product initiative and generate revenue, substantially more revenue than your previous endeavors, is an incredible feat. And personally, I've seen this happen. And I also went through in the pandemic. Pandemic forced a lot of businesses to like figure their stuff out very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you guys came out on the other side. And so from the journey to, all right, sales are working, investors are behind you now, you're growing revenue. Where are you guys at now? You just recently closed your Series A. Kind of get us, caught up to this point in terms of where you guys are on the capital side of the business.
Sure. So we launched FARO into the market after the Kickstarter. We went ahead and built the thing, manufactured it, started. We put out our first batch. We sold out. We put out our second batch, sold out as well. Revenue started growing, and we finally checked all the boxes that we needed for Series A. Essentially, were us solidifying the actually landing on this new space. Our cheap tip of the spear product, finding product market fit was also a big one. We needed a big check that we needed. And then the team started growing around this, and we were at a point where we said, okay, this is solid enough to build upon, solid enough that we have figured out the main aspects of this business, and we're in a position that is solid enough to grow it. That was originally going to happen this year. So, it was going to happen late 2023. We had, because of the world was in a bit of turmoil, the war, the Ukraine, it was a tricky year to fundraise, 2022. And we said, so this is not the moment to open our Series A. Let's just postpone it to late 2023. That was the play. And we were good in that play. But, and you will find, for good or worse, that our Series A round was not the way it's supposed to happen, or the way it usually happens. It was a bit of a good surprise in that sense, because we were, gearing up for the hardest race at the most challenging moment, but it ended up being, I'm not going to say smooth sailing, because that's bullshit. It doesn't exist, but it ended up being less terrible than we imagined. Probably we were lucky, but it timing wise, it ended up being just the right place and the right time kind of thing. So we weren't raising. FARO was doing really well. We were launching new products always through Kickstarter. We use that not right now, not because we need it, but because it's a great validation channel, and it's a sales channel in which you can sell a product 8-9 months before it sees the light of day. No other channel lets you do that. So we kind of use that. It's a great sounding board from way before hitting market. We usually make a lot of tweaks. This is a very tough demographic. So if you please those guys, you're probably going to be okay in the market. So we were launching new products around FARO. We were building this ecosystem of safety accessories to connect to each other and kind of build up your safety from multiple angles. That was doing well. We decided to postpone the round because, number one, we could, and number two, 2022 was not the right year to raise. We all knew that. And so we got introduced to a VC from one of our old investors, one of the guys who had seen through the entire snow pivot urban stage. So we had a relationship with these guys at this point. And they're like the rich uncles that you love, and they have supported you from very, very, very early on. And so we love these guys at this point. And so we got introduced to a VC right after we moved to Spain. Oh, that too is like, we knew that we can run this from Argentina pretty early on. So we knew that we wanted to be closer to our markets, closer to our capital. So that was either Europe or the States. We operate in both markets equally strongly. We ended up here in Madrid, setting up our HQ, whilst our product design and software teams remain in Argentina. We have our HQ here for all stuff that is strategic, commercial, high level content too happens here. And then of course, China for manufacturing. But I'm derailing. So we weren't going to raise, and we got this introduction at the worst moment. It's like, I'm getting introduced to a very, a nice match of a VC at the worst moment. We weren't nearly close to opening a round, but we obviously took their call anyways. And what you're going to do, you don't say no to these guys. So we took the call. It was, the fund was, the VC was Slingshot Ventures, Netherlands-based consumer product oriented VC. Perfect for us. They have this really cool mantra that their LPs are exited founders. So they have this nice full circle kind of a thing. And I think it's a more empathic approach than most VCs because of that. And we had a couple of chats. They loved what we were doing. We loved their approach, but it was like, hey guys, listen, we're not raising right now. We're not going to be raising for at least a year. Let's just keep in touch. So what we did, and I think this proved probably the genius move. We didn't know it was a move back then. We just sent them investor reports, kept them in check, send them updates almost monthly, sometimes even more. And pretty much, they were seeing us work without investing. And they, eventually started seeing that our promises eventually materialized, that we weren't full of shit, that we were hard workers. And I think enough of their boxes were checked internally because we didn't know. And at one point they said, they called us up and they said, late 2022, again, we weren't raising. They said, open the round. I was like, okay, but this is still a sucky time for fundraising. Remember? We have to fill the thing. Whether or not you come in, we still have to fill the whole thing. It's supposed to be more than 3 million. It's a big round to fill, at least for us. They said, open the round. So we got into that, and they were masterminding a play that we didn't see back then. They brought in another co-investor to lead the round, Ponuk. Ponuk happens to be the VC arm of the Pon family. The Pon family, the Pon group owns, they're super diversified. They're this huge Netherlands-based group. They have business in the automotive, energy sectors, but they own half of the bike brands, Like, I think they're 20-something. So for an accessory company for cycling to have Pon indirectly in your cap table is just a dream. Yeah. It was a big deal. It's like, okay, this is a strategic that is coming in. This changes things. And they were co-leading the round with Slingshot. They didn't fill up the whole thing. But we also had existing investors that had pro ratas coming in, a convertible that was open. And then they also brought in a smaller VC fund, also super interesting approach, joint capital. They manage the wealth, the investments, I should say, of retired athletes that they're, they've done well in their careers. Most of them retire early as far as age is concerned. Like some of them are like, 30 and they're retired. They're super young and super active. And what I'm going to do with all this money, right? So they kind of teach them to invest. It's a pretty cool ecosystem they have. So they got in there as well. And between all of them, it was 3.5 million.
So there's a lot to share and highlight on this point, from basically focusing heads down on a business that went through a pretty tragic pivot, not tragic, but complicated, difficult pivot.
Yeah.
And putting your head down and just focusing on product market fit, like building the best product you can for what ended up being probably a much larger audience, more lucrative audience potentially than, just the snow audience. And, something I like to call out, because like you said that the round went smoother and easier. And I'm sure there's some like hidden details that, come up. It's never always perfect when raising a round, but
Hard.
basically the VC came to you and set everything up and got things going. This is like a dream case. This is like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? As many founders might be listening, kind of saying, but you did a lot of things right. You took meetings early, before you were raising. You established rapport and relationship over an extended period of time. But the most important piece is you shared updates saying you were going to do X and you did X. Like you say you're going to do one thing and then you actually do it. And that's probably one of the most powerful ways to build trust with a VC and a relationship over time that founders just, not all, but a lot of founders really struggle with this concept of they think that I want money now. I'm going to start talking to VCs. And what they don't realize is, no, you need to be building these relationships months in advance, if not a year or two in advance before you actually open the round, because they just need to build trust with you. They need to see what you've been up to. They need to see you hit on deliverables, and they need to be able to believe in you. And that's what you guys executed. And that's phenomenal. And you should definitely pat yourself on the back along with your team. So when it came to this, you kind of, the cats in this case, the VCs got herded for you. And when it came to kind of negotiating terms, given it was a very different market from, 2021 and 2020. How did you guys feel about the negotiation, the terms, and just how things kind of came out for you on the other side? And kind of where does it enable you to go now as a company?
So I got to say, you always picture, so this was our first institutional round. Before that, we only dealt with family offices, very wealthy private investors, the accelerator, which has its fun, but it's different, right? It's none of them were a proper institutional VC. So you kind of build up this scary image of VCs over time. And I was not happy about that part going in. So that's what we expected, right? That the big, bad, hairy wolf coming, stomping at your door, demanding crazy stuff from you. And to be honest, what we ended up receiving was, don't take me wrong, very diligent investors. Like they were thorough. Due diligence was borderline traumatic on the founding team and some of the senior staff. We didn't sleep for like 6 days. I think not that I recommend it, but it always ends up happening. I think we slept like 6 hours over, 4 days. It was not good, but we did it. I mean, I think it was part of the deal. It's like they asked for a lot of things very shortly, like without a lot of lead time, because if you don't have it, you can't fake it. That's my take. I haven't asked them yet, actually. So, did you do this on purpose? Like did you only give me 4 days because you knew that I couldn't make it up? So they gave us 4 days to put all this huge list together before they came in, and they did this massive due diligence. There was all day long. I think it was 7 hours worth of meeting, where they lifted every single rock there was to lift, and they were very, very diligent. But when it came to answer your question, when it came to the terms, the negotiation of the terms, they were, of course, harsh. I mean, they were leading the round with major strategic, kind of a dream couple, if you will, a consumer goods oriented VC backed by fellow exited founders, and the VC arm of the world's largest cycling player. It's like, where do I sign? But then again, you can't just say yes to anything. We have an existing valuation. We have existing shareholders. We have metrics. Unfortunately, we had a larger number of rounds prior to Series A because of the pivot. So we didn't just start out from scratch, new company, new cap table, new shareholders. We maintained everything out of trust, out of gratitude, I think, to our investors that, they saw us through the hard tumbles, and it was just only right to continue, using the same vehicle, even if it meant more dilution to us and more, let's say, butchered cap table. We still maintained it. So it was hardly a classic Series A stage company because we had more rounds prior. We had more dilution than normal. We had a pivot in the middle. We had solid number of shareholders, which isn't necessarily a good thing when you're coming into Series A, like too large of a cap table. So you had all these things. Plus, it was a shitty time to raise, right? 2022. But then again, it was then that told us to open the round at a shitty moment, nonetheless. But there was this kind of, to and fro that was going on. And yeah, of course, they were harsh, but they were also fair. And they didn't ask for anything that we didn't have in place before, almost. And at that point, we were thankfully pretty well versed in terms of, corporate governance, board mechanics, liquidation preferences, anti-dilution mechanics, the whole work. So it was kind of smooth sailing from that end because they didn't ask for anything crazy. And I think at one point they also were, this is me thinking out loud, but they were also considering their relationship with our existing shareholders. It's like, if you come in, kick the table, kick the board out and just say, these are the terms now, then you might be able to pull it off, but probably everyone's going to hate you for it. You don't want that starting, you don't want that to be your first step, I think, in a potential future collaboration that it's going to last years. So I think they also concerned themselves with starting on the right foot with the shareholders as well as a talented team. So they conducted themselves really, really well in this scenario. And it didn't end up being the big mad hairy wolf we all pictured going into this, which again, it's not just, hey, they weren't harsh, they weren't diligent, they were, but they were just, also logical and common sensed, which is a lot these days.
And that's great to hear in terms of that story. And, like, diligence can be tough, and it's kind of expected these days from VCs. There are the days of kind of like throwing term sheets without seeing anything is gone. Thankfully, I think the world is a better place because of it.
Yeah.
But I also want to highlight the fact that, the integrity you guys maintain during your downtime when you could have easily shut down that company and started a new one and start fresh and kind of capture more equity for yourself. Easier said than done, but not easy in my own eyes, and probably not yours either, in terms of the reputation that comes with that. And
how do you look at them in the face? It's like,
exactly.
We couldn't live with that.
Yeah. And that's something that probably also another checkbox for, this VC, Slingshot and the other VCs that came in later, of like, look how they acted in the stand-up integrity they had in this most difficult, controversial point of the business, and how they treated their investors then. It's a positive sign that, you'll treat your investors properly down the road as well. So they didn't want to come in and be unfair to you as well. So you're setting the precedent, and and that's something a founder should know, is like, every term sheet you sign, every investor you come in, like, whatever the terms are now, you're setting the precedent for what will come down the road. And the more egregious terms today are going to be either equal and or more egregious down the road. And this investor is probably maybe assuming that you'll need additional capital down the road, maybe from bigger investors. They don't want to come in with excessive terms that will come back to bite them, down the road. Because whoever comes new and top always gets the priority.
Yeah.
So appreciate you sharing that story and those insights, as you kind of went through that journey. And when it came to it sounds like mostly existing investors and the new investors that came in were kind of like herded all together from existing investors mostly. But you haven't really talked about how you got all those investors, the original investors, to the table in terms of how you got in front of them, how you discovered them and got them to invest. And so I want you to touch on that. And another question I want to kind of bring up in a moment is, given the dilution that you experienced on the founder side and team side, like how did you guys manage that forward? So let's go to the first question. What was your strategy to getting those early stage investors to kind of believe in and find them and get in front of them?
So what got us our foot at the door really was the lead accelerator. They had I've been very critical of them in a lot of ways as far as the program goes, but as far as the opportunities they afforded us, we closed our first round because of them. They filled in at that point. It was 600,000 seed round, and they filled most of it. And then it was up to us to. I think this was on purpose. Like they put in 400 and said, "Okay, now you go get the 200 remain. Prove to me that you can do this." Sounds fair. We ended up going to anyone that was close to us that could help. Friends and family at that point weren't that relevant because the amounts were so high. So we ended up pooling some wealthy private investors together into a decent ticket, and then into I think it was 100K or 200K. And then we had another guy come in with 60. We ended up oversubscribing. I think it was 700, but it was like this, a big $400,000 check, and then smaller spread across tickets.
But how did you get the smaller guys? So you kind of mentioned they were, high net worth individuals, but how did you get in front of them? If it wasn't friends and family,
well, we got them through friends and family. It was always warm intros, and we were very diligent with our decks, our numbers, and of course we had the Adidas family leading the round, which was something already. But at that point, there wasn't a complete stranger on board besides the lead accelerators group. That it wasn't actually the lead; it was lead shareholders. Amongst them, we had a couple individuals that resonated with our mission the hardest, and they were the ones who put in the ticket. So it wasn't everyone inside lead. It was mostly Harold Primat, Swiss guy, racing driver, super fun guy, and Paul Caicedo, Colombian family office type investor. Both of whom we are, of course, really really close. But by this time, we've I know their families. They know ours. We've met 100 times. So there wasn't really strangers at that point. And then we started being connected to them. So the first strangers we brought into following rounds were a family office that was an acquaintance of one of our guys. It was always warm intros. But one thing we did do every single time is whenever we had an intro, it was like Armageddon. It was full preparation. Like we went in hard. So like no question could go unanswered. No number could be unclear. We had to know our bits front to back. And we set a really high bar on as far as our decks, our presentation materials, our numbers, our charts, our spreadsheets, our math. Everything was very, very clear from the get-go. Managing cap tables throughout the process, also a very useful and unexpected skill, because a lot of these guys are very active and they want to keep a certain amount of equity in your business. And if you provide constant updating of that number over the years, they're going to help out. They're going to, be active. And we were lucky enough to get people in that every single time we raised, and we probably raised too many times, too often, out of, it was an attempt to reduce risk on the investor side, but it was a mistake too, because it really hurt the cap table to raise so many times without dramatic value increases between rounds. That's a learning we take home from that period.
Were you guys using like convertible notes or safes in between kind of these larger rounds and consolidating them together? Like, was that the
We
makeup of it?
did at one point, we did, but a lot of these guys are like, traditional minded people, not used to venture capital type investments, not super experienced angel investors either. So the language that they understood was a price round. It's like, I give you X money, you give me X equity. Let's go. Full value alignment. Don't talk to me about caps, discounts, timeout periods, anything. So we ended up doing that, taking that road, which also was hurtful in the long run. And so too many rounds, too close together without big valuation jumps is clearly not the way to go. But one thing we did build over time with these guys was a relationship. I mean, they saw us bust our asses night and day. They saw us promise. They saw us deliver. They saw us go to China. They saw us, these are hard promises that we were fulfilling. So I think they took that to heart. And every single time we had a need for capital, they chipped in. Every single one of them, every single time. That is until our Series A came, which was bigger money and bigger tickets. And I think that most of them said, I've done my job. I've got them this far. Now it's time for someone else to take the gig.
So, yeah, and to be honest, like what you experience is what a lot of companies are dealing with right now. Kind of these rolling saves or like these kind of consistent rounds of like small checks, small rounds kind of coming in to kind of keep the business, to the point where, you still have the opportunity to win. As much as it's nice to get the full lump sum all at once, the reality is it's hard, like certain metrics have to be hit. It's a whole process to kind of do a proper, equity round. So what you experience is not unusual. And I'm kind of glad you shared that just so people aren't looking at this, you guys as, oh, you just got all your investors handed to you on a silver platter. It doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like you had quite the struggle and journey to kind of get to the point where you had this opportunity. But, as a last question before, to wrap up, I do want to talk about, given all those rounds, the dilution between three founders, it must have been pretty, substantial. What have you guys done? How's been like the morale on that aspect? Because, taking that type of dilution, were there additional option pools granted to you to kind of, give you additional vesting options? Like just kind of walk through that kind of process. So just kind of share some insights to founders that might have gone through it or might be going through it.
Yeah. So that, of course, was the chief downside to multiple rounds and too many rounds too often. And the cap table got hurt that way. But again, because we were dealing with people that were in it from the start, that had established a relationship, a trusting relationship at this point, they also saw that. And before Series A got even open, we did is we liquidated the option pool that we had in place. We just allocated all those points to the founding team and some senior staff, and then rehashed it. It's like we give them all away and then built a new one prior to the round even opening, which was of course dilutive to everyone, mind you. But it was a way to refill some of that equity that was lost along the way and put us in a position that was more consistent of an unaccustomed Series A prerequisite. Wasn't even there. I mean, but it was closer at least. And then the VCs that came in, again, also speaks to their integrity as VCs, and also speaks to the kind of relationship that they want to have with us founders. They also acknowledged this, and they actually, which was a complete surprise to me, and I'm not sure if it's even common market practice at this point, but they allocated an extra couple points to be added onto the pool after the fact, after the round, to kind of soften the blow dilution wise, specifically for us founders. Also another good sign that, you're getting in bed with the right people. And people always joke, and you hear these cliches thrown around that, investors it's like a spouse of sorts. It kind of is in a way that I think a founder is like more of a spouse. Like I see my co-founders every single day. They're like brothers to me at this point, but that doesn't mean an investor is not a long committed relationship that it's hard to get out of. And it is. And, to me, stuff like that matters because it says a lot. It says that you're getting on a boat with the right kind of people, and they have a similar kind of mind and reasoning, and they're common sense, and they're also compassionate when they very well could not be. Like, no one asked them for this. They volunteered it. No one asked them to respect most of the standing terms we had with our investors. They did. So I think that maybe I got this. We were super lucky in terms of what VCs we got, but the two that we have on board, the two we have on board is, or three, I should say, are super reasonable, more so than I ever imagined, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure how representative of reality this is, or how useful it's going to be for other founders. Maybe everyone else, it's the demon that we had foreseen. I don't know.
No, it is actually, I wouldn't say it's the most common thing, but when you have multiple dilutive rounds, smart VCs know that adding an option pool post-close or, kind of post-money is the right gesture, because they're sacrificing a pretty insignificant amount on their side, but it's a major impact to the founders to kind of, motivate them. And it's a negotiation chip for founders too, if it doesn't come up in the discussion. Like, negotiating term sheets is a two-way conversation. You don't have to accept every term given to you.
Yeah.
And it just sounds like, you were fortunate enough to have some amazing VCs join your team or join your cap table, and understanding that it's a long-term game and properly incentivizing you. So I'm glad you shared that, just because that is something a lot of founders face. I've heard some really horror stories that were awful, and have experienced both positive and negative outcomes in these situations in my own businesses. So I appreciate you sharing these insights. This has been an incredible, time listening to your journey and your story of just, globally distributed team that's servicing multiple different markets and having multiple different raises, 2 lives essentially, as a company. So it's been a fascinating story. And honestly, it's a more common story in my mind of what I've experienced amongst our community and network. It's like the very small percentage of companies that are just like perfect straight up and to the right. And in reality, that it can be a very bumpy ride, and you guys are getting that chance to kind of, continue on your journeys with the right partners on your side. So really appreciate having on the show for the cyclists, the boarders, the, e-skaters out here that are listening today. Where can they learn about your products and, learn more about you?
Sure. So you can always find what we're up to at unit1gear.com. There's our growing product portfolio of safety accessories is there, starting with FARO. We have a new helmet coming up, smart lights, backpack, the whole ecosystem for mobility. It's being born right now. Very exciting times. Again, part of what this round has done for us is putting fuel in the car and just enabling us to speed up and start growing this portfolio rapidly, growing the team, adding more tech, more products into the mix. It's a very, very exciting time for us, and it's all there at unit1gear.com. We also have our latest Kickstarter launch just closed last week, so we shifted into Indiegogo. We could find us there as well. The whole Aura family, hybrid smart helmet, smart lights, it's all there to be delivered by the end of the year. So yeah, a lot is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months, product wise, market wise. It's a fun ride. We're barely getting started, and it's very, very exciting time.
Awesome. Well, I think it's gonna be on my Christmas list. I've already sent it to my wife, and excited to chat.
If she's worried about you, there's this crash detection thing we have on the helmet. Like she can know if you had a crash with your location. So this is going to be a good argument for you to get it on the tree, like for real.
Yeah, I think my wife will buy it even if I don't. Even if I didn't want it, if she knows about it, she's going to buy it just for those reasons alone. So, really appreciate you having me on the show, Juan. This has been an amazing podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. We hope you learned something valuable. And if you did, be sure to let us know in the comments or by hitting that like button. If you're a founder looking to raise capital, be sure to check out our platform, thunder.vc, to use our AI to identify which investors are most qualified to invest in your business. It's free to join. Just go to thunder.vc. Again, that is thunder.vc. And if you're new, we release new episodes every week. And if you or someone you know recently raised a round and want to share your story, be sure to email me at jason@thunder.vc. That's our show, and we hope to see you next week.